Hey everybody, have you ever gone to use your miter saw and you've noticed that the cuts aren't coming out square? I've seen a lot of this online and a lot of complaints about different types of saws. But the one thing to know is that a miter saw can easily be squared. So in this video, I'm going to show you how. All right, let's get to it. So when you're squaring a table saw, my preference is to use one of these. This is just a 4-inch machinist square, and we're going to be using this to not only square it vertically like this, but also to go through and push this up against our fence, so that way we can make sure the blade is also square to the fence. Now, what I'm going to do for this, I'm going to pull this guard up and I'm going to set this here. And if you look closely, you can see that there's a bit of a gap at the bottom. And so because of that, that means that we're going to have to adjust the saw, to the right-hand side just a little bit. Now be very careful when you do this, not to push, because if you push, with this being a 12-inch saw, it'll have a little bit of deflection in the blade. So we just want to make sure that we're touching it and we're not going to be touching the teeth. So in this case here, I've taken the miter saw and locked it down. All right, so let's have a look around at the back, and I'm going to show you where the adjustment is back there. Now, one of the things to note before you do any of these adjustments is you're going to want to make sure that the saw is unplugged, so that way we're not going to be exposed to anything turning on if we hit the switch or whatnot. If you look back here, you'll see that I've got screws. So I'm gonna tilt this to the side, so that way it's going to be a little bit easier for you to see. Okay, so if we tilt this all the way to the side over there, we're going to see that we've got 1, 2, 3 screws here. And then if we tilt this to the other side, we've actually got a screw on this side as well. So because we're going to adjust it from this side, I'm going to take this is a torx driver, and your saw might be a little bit different, but we're going to put this in there and we're going to loosen it up just a little bit. And we're also going to loosen this one here. Again, just a little bit, just enough to take pressure off. Now we're going to lean this to the other side, just like that. And then we're going to do the same thing here. Okay, a little loose and a little loose there as well. So the idea is that we're going to move this plate. Now, because we have to come this way, what we're going to do is I'm just going to take a flathead screwdriver and a mallet, and actually in this case we may not even need the mallet, which we don't. So I've got a slight amount of adjustment here. So I'm going to push it to the right hand side a little bit. I'm going to pinch it there, and then I'm going to tighten this one back down, and then I'm going to follow it with the other ones as well on both sides. So now in theory, what we've done is we've slightly adjusted its position, because all of these are positive stops that this little lever on my saw anyways is going to engage in. So we're going to flip this up, and that's now automatically engaging in those positive stops. So then we're going to lock this in place, and I'm going to take the miter and slide it all the way back again, just like it was before, and lock that in. And then let's go around and have a look at the front to see how we are for square. All right, so we're gonna go back to the front here, and we're gonna pull up our guard, and we're gonna take our 4-inch square here. We're gonna slide it across, pushing it on the steel plate, not my zero clearance insert, and just touch it to the blade. And if you look at that, we are perfectly square on the vertical axis. That's what we want to see. So next, we're going to need to square the blade to the fence itself to make sure that this is sitting exactly at 90 degrees. So when you do this, you can find out if it's sitting exactly at 90 degrees by cutting a piece and then measuring it that way. But what I like to do, in addition to doing that, is to Again, push my 4-inch up against the fence, gradually sliding it over to the blade, and we're actually fairly square, but right now we're touching in the front right here, but at the back we're just a little bit out. So because of that, it means that we need to move this way. Now, in order to do that, we're going to have to adjust our locking plate at the front, and I'll show you that. Okay, so to adjust our locking plate, which is this part here and this part over here, you're going to see that there's all these notches. Okay, all of these notches are positive stops. And there's these Allen key bolts. Got one here, here, I believe there's one underneath, as well as over here, and then under this piece also over there. So we're going to loosen all of those off, and again, we're going to want to tap it in place, so that way we can adjust where our positive stops are going to be. So for this one, I'm going to use an Allen key that fits those bolts, and then only if needed, I'm going to use a flathead screwdriver and a mallet. There's a pretty good chance that that I won't need to do that I'll be able to slide it. So I'm going to slide this piece over, and I'm sliding that over so I can get access to that bolt. Now, once I've got access to that bolt, I'm going to take my Allen key, and when we do this, you're only loosening them enough, just enough, so that way you can slide the plate. You don't have to go crazy with it. There's no need. So I've loosened these two. Now I'm going to come around here, and I'm going to loosen these ones off also. Just not even a quarter turn. There's no need to go crazy with them. Now that I've done that, I'm going to unlock the saw and move it to the side. And as we can see, there's going to be another bolt under here. Now, this is on my miter saw. This is a 12-inch rigid sliding compound miter saw. It might be a little bit different on yours, depending on which one you have. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, now that I've got the bolts loosened up, I'm going to push my lever down because I want to lock this in at 0 degrees, or at least what would be considered 0 degrees. So I've got it locked in now, and so I'm going to set my Allen key down. And again, we're going to be checking this. So we're not quite square yet. So now that we've got this loosened, we're going to, kind of moved it there a little bit. Now we're going to want to tap it back and forth until we get at our 90-degree point. So here, now I've got a little bit of space at the front and no space at the back. So I've actually gone a little bit too far. So we're going to tap that just a little. And we're going to push that up against. Looks like we're going to have to go a little farther. Again, you don't need to do this with a lot of pressure. Remember, when we're checking square, we want to make sure that we're not pushing on that blade, especially when you have a 12-inch blade because of the amount of deflection. So now this here is perfectly square at the back and the front to the fence. Okay, so we're going to pull that out of there. Now we're going to take our Allen key, and we're going to set that guard back down. Now we're going to tighten these Allen keys, these Allen bolts, back into place, because we want to make sure to lock this down, so that way those positive stops don't move. Okay, so now we've got the 4 bolts, the 2 here and the 2 over here, locked down. Now we're going to move this out of the way so we can gain access to our 5th bolt, and just nice and snug. Now, one thing to caution on, so this Allen key, as you can see at the tip, it is a little bit worn, so I'm being very careful about using this. You don't want to strip these bolts, because if you strip those bolts, you are not going to be able to loosen them or tighten them. So now we've got it tightened down. We're going to double check this again. And so We're not quite sitting at 0, and that was my mistake. I'm going to move it over here now. Now we're locked into our positive stop. There we go. So we're going to lift this back up again, put this up against, and we are still sitting nice and square, which is great. So the next thing we're going to want to do is plug this in. We're going to take a piece and we're going to cut it. And when we cut, what we want to do is have something longer, and we want to drag it along to see if it stays in square going out further away from the fence. All right, so let's give that a shot. Okay, so what I've got for this is I've got a 1/4 inch piece of MDF. This is just an extra piece or scrap piece that I happen to have laying around. So we're going to use this to check the square between our back fence and here. Okay, because that's going to be incredibly important. So when we do this, again, make sure you're pushed right up against the back of the fence. All right, and then we're going to fire it up and do this cut. And now that we've done that, so we're going to check this to see if it's square. Now, rather than using this, because this is only going to show us 4 inches and this is around 8 inches in length, I'm going to take a larger square and we're just going to go like this. And if you look at that, that is almost bang on square for me as a woodworker. I think it's good enough. We can check it with this one as well, and if you check it with this one, as you can see, that's perfectly square there too. The next thing that we want to do is we want to check our squareness here to make sure that we're square vertically. So for this, I'm just going to use a small chunk of pine that I had laying in my shop. Again, we're going to push it up the fence and we're going to put it just over the cover of that hole. This is a smaller piece, so we're going to end up using this machinist square to square it up. So let's go ahead and give this a cut and see how we did. So we've done our vertical cut. Now we want to do is we want to check this side to this side to make sure we're at 90 degrees. And if we put this on here, we are bang on at 90 degrees. So now what we know is we're squared on the vertical plane and we're squared on the horizontal plane up against the fence. So that's in the way that I square my miter saw, and I don't have to do it all the time, but I do check it every so often. Well, I hope this video helped you out in terms of how to square your miter saw. Keep in mind, every miter saw is going to be a little bit different between brands, perhaps different types of bolts, different sizes. There may be different adjustment methods, but just know that on the horizontal and vertical axis for any miter saw, you can square it up fairly easily. Even older miter saws, they all have the ability to be squared up in some way. If you're not familiar with how to do it or where to make those adjustments, have a look at the instruction manual that came with your saw. It'll probably give you some really good tips on that. As far as the tools that I use, they were very basic. A 4-inch machinist screw. This is the square that I use to square my my scrap piece. Afterwards, the mallet that I used and a flathead screwdriver, just in case you have to tap it a little bit more. And then, of course, for mine, I had a torx driver to loosen the bolts on the backside. And then I had the Allen key for making the adjustment in the front. So it's really simple. Anybody can do it and get those cuts nice and square. All right, now do me a favor. If you could hit the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel, that would be great. And don't forget to turn that bell icon on so that way you can get notified about new videos that are posted. All right, we'll see you next time.